How's it going, everybody? Mr. Holton here, and yes, we're finally gonna talk about some Mass Effect. Yeah, I know you guys have been waiting for a long time for me to talk about the next game in the series again, but there's just really not been too much to talk about. Now, there is an industry rumor going about regarding the next Mass Effect that I haven't really commented on that much. We'll talk about that later. So let's first of all start off with the thing that has me kind of excited. So over on EA's job listings board, a new position opened up over at BioWare specifically for Mass Effect. And that position is that of Senior Gameplay Animator. Yes, indeed, this is actually pretty big. Now let's dive into some of the details that we can see here on this page, starting with we are looking for an experienced senior gameplay animator with a focus on pre-visualization of gameplay systems for third-person action 3C development, meaning character, camera, and controls. You will collaborate with core gameplay and narrative leadership groups to create animations that help to establish systems which blur the lines between traditional gameplay and narrative experiences. What I find so interesting about this line, maybe it doesn't mean that much, but when I read this, I instantly thought of Mary DeMarle, because she said in an interview not too long ago, I think, that her design philosophy is that of narrative and gameplay working in tandem to really create an immersive experience or a good game. I might be incorrect on some of the details of what she said that, but she said something along those lines. And Mary DeMarle, in case you didn't know, was the narrative director, or well, the writer for Deus Ex Human Revolution, and then one of those positions again for Mankind Divided, the sequel, and then she also was the narrative director for Guardians of the Galaxy that released a couple of years ago, which actually won Best Narrative in 2021. Now, I'm not exactly sure if this is usually what job descriptions tend to say when it comes to gameplay animator listings, but I find it interesting nonetheless to see this sort of description when you have somebody on board like Mary DeMarle who has that philosophy in itself. And what this is really telling me for the next Mass Effect is that BioWare and Mike Gamble and the team are trying to make sure that the game is like a seamless experience between gameplay and the narrative, so that everything just follows, right? So the entire experience will be or feel organic, and that the gameplay feels fitting to what's going on around you in the game world. Because, you know, sometimes when it comes to gaming, a lot of AAA games have this weird disconnect between the gameplay and the game world and the narrative. And for some reason, I just find it particularly encouraging to see this type of philosophy for the next Mass Effect game. In any case, the job listing reads on here, and it says, the responsibilities are to create and implement character animation using mocap, keyframe, and in-engine tools. And thank God for that, because a lot of, like many of you guys already know that BioWare has a tendency to reuse a lot of animation assets. And so it's just cool to see that they're moving on with some mocap here. While they have no doubt probably used that before, especially with like Mass Effect Andromeda or Dragon Age Inquisition, it's still cool to see that they're, trying to improve, especially, when it comes to using a different engine, because further down, we see that a qualification that you need to have for this position is familiarity with integrating animations in game engines such as Unreal or Unity. Now, a lot of you guys already knew that BioWare has been looking at using Unreal for a while now. I've reported on it. Now, that last part with Unity doesn't really inspire much confidence, especially because of what's happened recently. So I'm gonna assume that BioWare is not gonna be working in Unity for the next Mass Effect game, and that they're gonna proceed with Unreal, which has been reported on before. Again, this position is absolutely super important to make sure that Mass Effect is going to be properly animated this time around. And it's just good to see. I don't know why, it's just a job listing, I know, but the details that they've added, the different qualifications and responsibilities this person will have, it makes me think that, BioWare has learned their lesson, hopefully. All right, so with all this said, let's talk a little bit about that industry rumor. I've seen people write to me several times asking me what I think about it, And now this rumor comes from the Xbox 2 podcast, where none other than Jez Corden says that there's an industry rumor that the next Mass Effect is gonna be going back to the basics and that it's not gonna be open world.
I've heard the Mass Effect is ditching open world and going back to its classic format. I don't know if that's accurate 100%, but it's an industry rumor.
Now, he says this as sort of like an offhand comment when comparing it to Starfield that recently released. But in any case, so this rumor has, well, been talked about already by several people. And my take on it is that, you know, it's very possible. I don't have any insiders myself. I don't know if this is true. But then again, you know, Mass Effect has always had open world elements, especially in Mass Effect 1, right? Because there has been open world areas, sort of, where you can explore and run around and drive around the Mako. And to be honest, I don't really have a problem with open world in Mass Effect. I mean, it could help with immersion a lot. The biggest issue for me in Mass Effect Andromeda was the fact that you had to drive everywhere for your main objectives. Like, exploration should always be like an optional thing, and make sure that there's interesting stuff to find or look at. As I've mentioned before, like take maybe you know, BioWare should take some notes from Elden Ring, for example, because that's a really good open world because you can find so many cool things. So many things that you didn't expect. Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty even has a lot of really cool visual storytelling, as we've mentioned before. And that's also, of course, open world cyberpunk. And so I don't think that Mass Effect necessarily has to go back to being like a corridor shooter, sort of. I do think that there is a place for open world stuff in Mass Effect, but it has to be interesting. It has to be cool. There has to be things to find. There has to be things that make you interested in finding more things in the world. Maybe, you know, take a couple of pages from Baldur's Gate 3, which also has a ton of interesting things to find around the world. And again, Baldur's Gate 3 is sort of semi-open world even there, even if you have like, what is it, 3-4 maps? So Baldur's Gate 3 isn't entirely open world, it has closed off sections, and I think that could work for Mass Effect as well. But are they going back to it? That's a good question. I don't know. But I would take this rumor with a grain of salt because, you know a lot of you have asked me about it, and that's my honest answer. Just take it with a grain of salt because we haven't really heard anything from BioWare at all. Alright guys, so that's it for today. Essentially, I just wanted to spew a little bit about Mass Effect and talk about it a little bit more, especially now with this job listing, because it does give some hints towards the final vision for the next Mass Effect game, and I'm not gonna lie guys, it's looking pretty good. I'm pretty positive about this. But I do want to know what you guys think in the comments below as always. Oh, and of course, have a great day. Mr. Alton signing out.